Hello, everyone. John Adkison here again, doing another interview for the circumcision in quotes, harms docu-series. And today I have Paul from across the pond joining us. Paul, please introduce yourself and tell us how you ended up here.
I'm Paul. I'm in my 50s. I'm from northwest Scotland. I basically belong to a group on Facebook that says "Say no to circumcision," and I'm sort of being got more involved in, learned quite a bit about what goes on, like a lot of the time in America and for religious reasons, and I find it to be quite hideous the more I get to know about it. And I feel quite strongly about it, especially towards children having no say in what's done to their body. So is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. So in Scotland, it's a very uncommon practice, right?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's not done.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your point of view on this. It's always appreciated when uh, people from other countries join in on this because it's really the United States stands out on this topic. How it's been so normalized for so long. Countries like the UK and Canada and Australia have been cutting back. I mean, they basically took it out of their public healthcare funding decades ago. All right, so the rates of cutting dropped drastically, but in the United States, it's still very much a part of the medical system. So I have a list of topics that I try to cover in these interviews. The major highlights are the physical aspects, and I'm going to just cover the physical aspects of males pretty much. Might talk a little bit about how female circumcision goes on too, and intersex normalization surgeries. I consider them all ritualistic genital cutting practices. They occur across the world to varying degrees. And then I'll talk about how the male genital cutting affects sexual relationships. And then I'll jump into the psychological aspects of this, and then the relationships between people in general, not just between sexual partners, but across the board. How all sorts of relationships are affected by ritualistic genital cutting. And then I'll try to tie it all together with how it's interrelated with FGM and intersex genital cutting practices and social productivity, how things would be different in the world, how much more productive we'd likely be in the world if this stuff wasn't going on. And then I added this one recently, and it's about forced retraction, or not knowing how to care for intact genitals, primarily in the intact male penis. So start off with the physical. The word I like to cover is acropastion. John Geisger from Doctors Opposing Circumcision did a presentation for me at a baby expo one time, and he shared an image of a statue over there, I guess in Greece or Rome or whatever, that showed an intact man, nude, showing his penis, and you could definitely tell that he's intact. He didn't have the mushroom top, and there's a little bit of skin hanging off the end, and it comes down to a bit of a point, and then probably about a centimeter of, I mean, it's stone, but skin that would be hanging off the end of his, past his glands, past the head of his penis. And for the most part, what is cut these days is, well, what they do is lay bare the glands. This is something that's actually written in Jewish documentation and supposedly started happening like in 130 some AD, when they discovered that Jewish men would hang weights and stuff off of their penis to try to spread things or stretch things out so their glands would be covered, because it was viewed as, it was viewed badly amongst those they were playing with or doing games, athletics outside, to have the glands be exposed. So one of the things that has been scientifically studied, I don't know why this needs to be scientifically studied, I mean, just ask intact man, but that's sensitive skin, right? All that skin that, makes up the prepuce that rolls down onto the penis when there's an erection or gets pulled back is sensitive skin, is highly innervated, highly vascularized, and 2 studies validated that fact. It's sensitive to light touch. It's got Meissner's corpuscles in it, and to heat, right? And one of the things that the AEP said in the early 70s, it was their first policy, was that the foreskin, or the male prepuce, I think they used the word foreskin, is there to protect the glands. Still an applicable statement today, but they pulled it off of future policies. Don't know why. Didn't say anything, but yeah, it's there. When you look at an intact man, it's been covered, and you pull back, you see that the glands looks very different than one on a man that's been preputially amputated most of his life. It's kind of like having your mouth protecting your tongue. If you were to stick your tongue outside of your mouth for an extended period of time, it would dry out. If it sticks out for years, it'll probably keratinize and harden and all that. And people use the term turtleneck a lot when it comes to this part, right? And really, while some people might be derogatory when they're using that term, it's a very good representation of what the foreskin is. Some people compare it to your eyelid, right? You have one side that is mucosal and one side that's skin, but it's one layer of skin. There's nothing unrolling about it, while the male prepuce, you can see here, unrolls as it goes down onto the penis. It's actually a fold of skin, not a flap of skin, and certainly not extra. And like other mucosal parts of your body, so there's the glands itself is mucosal tissue, and then the inner part of the male prepuce is also mucosal, like the inside of your mouth, inside of your nose, inside of the vagina. It's mucosal, so it's moist in there, and thus provides lubrication for sex. There's another part here called the frenulum, and this is often compared to the part underneath your tongue. It goes up and down between the bottom of your tongue to the bottom of your mouth, and this actually represents that with this string right here, where it goes from the bottom side of the glands down to the prepuce, and it kind of tugs back up on the prepuce to make it roll back up on top of the glands when the penis becomes more flaccid again after sexual activity. often share my own son's story. He was born with a tongue tie, and that's where the frenulum under your tongue is too small and grabs too much of the tongue. And
Okay.
for him, when he stuck his tongue out when he was first born, it would kind of go out like a fork instead of like everyone else's tongue. And we got it snipped the next day. Just a little bit of a snip, not full removal of it, just a little bit of a snip to disconnect from the end of the tongue, so his tongue was able to stick out, and he was able to go right to breastfeeding after that. So there's something similar to that called frenulum breve, abbreviation of frenulum, and sometimes men have to have that corrected. And then the last part is the ridged band. And this is often compared to the lips of your mouth, right? That's where it goes from the inner mucosal part out to the outer skin part. So same thing here. You got your inner mucosal and meets up with a ridged band and then goes out to the outer side. This isn't the greatest representation of that because this doesn't have the stretchy, squeezy part. This is just yarn. But on an intact normal penis, you can tell that it squeezes down and acts like a one-way sphincter, particularly for babies, to allow fluid out, but nothing to go back in. From what I've heard from multiple intact men is that as that ridged band starts coming down onto the glands and starts stretching out, starts spreading out, that just that process alone is erotic. So for those men that are missing those parts, there's various things that is likely to occur. One of the most common ones I hear a lot, there's actually I was just looking at this recently. There's a chart from, I think it's from circumcisionharm.org. One of the most common issues is scrotal webbing, where the shaft becomes hairy because the scrotum is being drawn up onto the penis as the penis becomes erect, right, and starts protruding more from the body. And since the scrotum is being, what's that?
It's mad.
Yeah, I hear you. One of the things, well, since the scrotum is being drawn up onto the shaft, I've seen this in many men, even in porn, is drawing up the testes with it. And what I've seen in porn is the testes get drawn up to the sides of the shaft instead of hanging down low like they're supposed to. And that's uncomfortable to a point because your testes, you don't want them to be squeezed, right? It's like getting kicked in the nuts for a guy, but not quite. Still, just a little bit of squeezing gets uncomfortable. For me, I even went further when I was in my teens and 20s. That one of my testes would actually, it would get so tight that one of my testes would pop inside of my body, and
Good grief.
that'd be really uncomfortable, and I'd have to stop any kind of sexual activity.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I actually interviewed one other guy on here so far that had that same problem.
Good grief.
Yeah. And then on the other side of it, since we were talking about the testes, the scrotum on the bottom side of the penis, right? This is the bottom part where the frenulum is and all that, right? On the top side, if you have a really tight cut, high and tight is called or whatever. When the penis starts getting filled up and to become erect, it doesn't have enough skin here to stretch out, so it starts arching upward, right? Much like
Good grief.
a crane or like the back of a tow truck. You have those cables that pull the arm up on the tow truck. Your penis starts bending like that outside of the body. So you've seen those balloons, those long, thin balloons that they use to make, they twist and make into animals or flowers or whatever things they want to make into. They're filled out with air, but if you just take one and you bend it, it kinks, right? It's not really designed to do a steep turn. This is filled with blood, so it gets the more that it gets filled with blood, the harder it becomes. So the less bendable it becomes. So that bend becomes more and more uncomfortable as the erection goes forward.
Oh, this is hideous.
Yeah, I learned to mind over matter. I learned how to try to control my erection so it wouldn't get too erect, so it wouldn't get uncomfortable.
Really?
Yeah.
Good God.
But it's still be challenging, particularly with a couple partners where they were used to being with men that had more skin to work with, so they wouldn't bend like that. They'd want to go straight out because they weren't cut as tight, or they were with intact men before. And when they try to do certain positions that would require my penis to be straight, this kind of thing would happen. So I kind of get a double kink, and I'd have to stop them from going too far, otherwise it would hurt. And it's well known that there's that injuries occur. But they say that it occurs because twisting or whatever. But what happens is the part that's holding the blood inside, the corpus cavernosum, breaks, and then you have internal bleeding, and you'll get inflammation. You'll get it'll turn purple and all that kind of stuff. Luckily, I haven't had that problem. I haven't had an actual injury, but I could definitely see that. It would be interesting to see if there was a study that looked at how many men had these kind of injuries and what percentage of them were circumcised or preputially amputated versus being intact.
This is oh my God. This is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah, unfortunately, not enough people know about these harms that occur far more often than you know, because like myself, I was 35 before I even started looking at this, and I just kind of figured that my situation, what was going on for me, was probably normal, or happening to every
Can
other
I
guy.
interject?
Please.
One of the biggest problems, I think, not just in America, but culturally, men are not encouraged to talk about things like that, personal and intimate. It's not something that they feel comfortable talking to hardly anybody about.
Yeah.
And in a lot of societies, you're supposed to just get on with it and be a man. These things are not discussed, and it's very sad. Women talk about things more freely than men do, but also the fact that things are not taken seriously. A lot of women do have a very an incorrect attitude towards anything to do with the genitals on a man. That they've always got an opinion, is what I hear, and there's not much sympathy, and there's ridicule to do with it, or something like that. And it's like, it's quite hypocritical, because women are always criticizing men for being insensitive to things. Well, maybe sometimes they should look back in a mirror. But yes, as I said to you before, the more that I've learned about what happens is I just find it more and more twisted and weird. And the things that I've learned in some of the cultures and what they do, and the stories, because I'm not cut.
Yeah.
But my experiences are a lot from friends. I grew up in London, very multicultural, where you've got people from, you've got Muslims and Jews and just and friends, things that were, a lot of crap went on in the 70s and 80s as well, to do with a lot of ignorance.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is down to urologists, really, and their views on things and what they decide to do, and not giving proper information. From what I've found out, I think what started it off for me was finding out that, like, one of my best friends was totally traumatized about what happened to him when he was 7. And he told me a lot about how he felt. We had a couple of drinks and he was sitting there, and I was totally amazed at how terrible it was. What an experience, and the ignorance involved. And yeah, that's what started it off. And then the more I've learned about it, I mean, I feel terrible at it, because it seems like, from what I've found out, that the British brought it over to America in the first place, which I feel a bit crap about, I must say. But yeah, I mean, if you don't feel something about the way children are treated and not given any choice, then I think you're pretty hard-faced. But to do with religions, there's a hell of a lot of ignorance that goes on, a hell of a lot. And you say it goes back a long way. And trying to educate people is difficult, I think. Basically, I think one of the most offensive things I heard was from a woman. And she said, yes, I'm going to make sure, if I have a boy, I'm going to have him circumcised, because it's much better for the woman, because he'll last longer. I'm like,
we'll cover that too.
Heavens, you insensitive person. I mean, if you turn it around the other way, the equivalent surely is the hood for the clitoris, isn't it? We're going to start cutting those off, are we? Because that does the same job, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know whether you want to consider the clitoral hood or the labia. I mean, there's lots of arguments about there are arguments that get into trying to compete for who's the worst harmed in this, and it's like, I don't see any point in trying to identify who has the worst harm in it. It's like, it's all, when it comes down to ethics, it's a very simple ethical equation. It's non-therapeutic and it's not consensual. It's not okay. Period. I don't care how extreme or how minor it is. If you're cutting the child's genitalia without a medical need, it violates ethical standards. Period.
Well, I'm also finding out that they've made lots of leaps and bounds. What did you call it? Phimosis? Is it?
Well, yeah, I haven't gotten to phimosis yet. But...
Yeah, but that's they've found ways of treating that as well now.
Oh yeah, there's lots of ways to treat that. There's multiple ways. So and it also gets diagnosed incorrectly, I think. Here, I'll go and cover that right now. I don't want to get into it. I don't even have it as a topic, but that's one of the reasons that people use for it. Problem is, when you're dealing with a child, and even all the way up to, like, I've met one guy that said he was like in his early 20s before his preputial lamina started breaking down, and this is where when the baby's born, the inner mucosa and the glands are attached, similar to like how your fingernail's attached to your finger. So it's not supposed to be separated. It's not supposed to be.
No.
One of the steps they do is they go in there and they pull it off, or they go in there with a metal probe to break it, right? So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, if a doctor is telling you that your boy has phimosis, take him somewhere else. So take him, particularly if you can find an intact, friendly doctor Take them, or even better, a doctor that is intact himself, not a doctor that has self-selection bias, and is cut himself and not knowing how the intact penis is supposed to work.
Well, I went along to a clinic. I had a urinary problem, and I went along to this clinic. You'll be amazed by this one. This was a few years ago now, and I went in, and he said, "Right, well, I need to examine you." So, I got undressed, and when he saw my penis, he was like, "Oh, you're not circumcised." So he said, "I'm not going near that." And I was like, "What?" So we went and put, because they didn't years ago wear gloves when they examined you. They just washed their hands afterwards. And I was like, what the hell? I mean, he wasn't from the UK. That's all I can say. But I was like, wow, leave your own cultural things behind.
Yeah.
You're a doctor to do a job. All these things over the years when, it's like, this one's amazing. When we lived in South London, yeah? I don't know what you call them in America. We have a sorting office where the post goes, right?
Yeah.
Now, went in there, and there's a little notice board, yeah? Local businesses and stuff like that, and things like that, thing to help the community. And there was a thing on the on the board, and it said, circumcision clinic, and it was up in about 5 miles away. I was like, what are we turning into here? We'd never have had anything like this. And the thing that I find very, very fascinating is that if a lot of this cutting is done under the premise of to do with religion, okay? Now, I thought that humans, I'm not a religious person.
Me either.
But if we were supposed to have been created in the image of God, why are we arrogant enough to think that we need to mess about with it? Yeah. I mean, haven't I got a point?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I try to avoid the religious. I avoid going deep into the religious discussion about it because it comes back down to one thing for me: religious freedom. I strongly believe that each individual has the right to choose for themselves what religious beliefs they have. And I don't think they should be fear mongered into believing anything or saying that they believe anything, because that would be very uncomfortable for me for people to say, I believe in this in order to, appease me if they think that I think they should be a Christian or they think they should be a Muslim or whatever. I like to keep the dialogue open, and I want people to feel safe about expressing their feelings about religion.
Yes. Yes.
And that
I mean, no,
that
I
starts
respect other
starts at
people's views on
birth,
it.
right? It starts at infancy. My religious freedom was violated when I was born. I'm permanently stuck with that fact. I'm living with this body that's been harmed by something that supposedly started out as a religious belief. I think it really went further back than that, but so to me, I see it as a religion being forced on me, and that's all there is to say about it. I don't really care what's said in the Torah or the Quran or the many different Christian Bibles or whatever. It should be left to the individual, period. If a grown adult decides they want to follow a particular religion, then they want to change their body for that.
I agree.
Fine.
I totally agree. The one thing I don't understand that people are not open to accepting is that when circumcision was started, when they decided they wanted to do it, for whatever the reasons were, that was a very long time ago when we didn't know very much about the body.
Yep.
Okay? We didn't know about a hell of a lot about genitalia.
Still
did
don't.
we? Well,
it's still not covered well
we
in
know
medical
more
textbooks.
now.
Yeah,
We
for
know
sure.
more now than we did.
Yeah.
And we're starting to know that don't mess with it.
Hmm.
You know, it's like, I don't know. This is the subject that I do have strong views about. And from the way I was, I think it's the way, right. Maybe I think it's to do with my sexuality as well. That as growing up, I questioned things
Hmm.
naturally. I was brought up
That's good.
with Catholicism
Mm.
and being told from 7 years old that you're evil, you're wicked. When you start to realize that you're going towards one direction, and it's not like something either you can possibly decide for yourself, it just happens naturally. So it's not something, it's something that's always been there. If somebody doesn't come out until they're 40 because they've been living with a woman, you know, it's always been there, but they just it hasn't developed or whatever. But what I'm saying is that I've learned to question things. I know fundamentally I'm not a bad person, yeah,
Yeah.
but being
Sure.
told you are, that's a fundamentally major part of your existence.
Yeah.
So I've seen things happen, and I've seen the harm and the things to do with a child as well as adults. Some of the things that I know, I mean, I had a friend who was Jewish, and he was 58, and it was awful. You know, I won't go into details now, but it was awful at his age and what he had to put up with. And I think the tide is turning, and people are believing that, you know, why don't you just let children decide for themselves when they're older what they
Mm.
want to do? And if they want this done, they want that done.
Yeah.
And it's time to modernize.
Yeah. You said something earlier about a man being a man,
Yes,
and that men should just, go on and let it be or
yes,
forget about it, whatever. To me, that's the opposite of being a man. A man protects, right? I mean, to most people, they believe that men are the ones that go off to war, right? I mean, that's changing nowadays, but men are supposed to be men and protect others, especially those that can't protect
yes,
themselves. Well, I'm
yes,
trying to protect babies. I'm trying to protect the next generation,
yes.
right?
Couldn't agree
So
more.
I'm not speaking. I'm not sharing this with everyone to get sympathy. I'm not interested in that. If this was not a thing that was happening today, by the thousands, tens of thousands of children today are getting their genitals cut for no good reason.
Yeah,
I would go on. I would go do something else completely different.
it's like
Be
making money for the
Yeah,
fact that they're sold for money is absolutely. I can't even put into words what I think about that. That people are
yeah,
making money out of human tissue
yeah.
is
In many
just
ways, yeah. Yep, by
unbelievable.
the billions of dollars. So
Oh,
so yeah. So I've got just a few other things here, 4 or 5 other things here about the physical attributes of male preputial amputations, that what they cause. So I talked about the pelvic floor and the testes. Then there's things that occur not all the time, but myelostenosis is one of the things that occur, and it seems like it occurs a lot. Unfortunately, it's not a horrible thing. I don't know. It probably depends on the particular case, but I had myelostenosis, and I have a very vivid memory. I was probably 8, somewhere in that age, and my urine would go everywhere when I urinate, standing up, whatever. I was visiting my grandmother, and my grandmother was like not having it, so she took me to the doctor, and the doctor looked, and it's like, oh, you got a little bit of skin going across your meatus, where your urine comes out, right? And that's what was causing it to go everywhere. So it's like a skin bridge, a little bit of a growth. So, and I didn't realize that until later that that's myelostenosis. And he just went and cut it off. No big deal. It's it wasn't innervated or anything. It's scar tissue, so not a huge deal. But I do have very vivid memory of it. And this again, Brian Arp tweeted about this not too long ago. I guess there was a study that found out that a very large percentage of males end up with it. Then there's skin bridges that occur, and I don't know what the percentage is, but SPU did a study and found like 11% of infant circumcisions are end up botched in one way or whatever and have to be fixed or something. But one of the skin bridges happen because the inner mucosa of what's left over and the glands tries to readhere because the body tries to heal itself.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've heard guys talk about how they have to stick Q-tips in between right underneath the corona and
What?
underneath their skin bridge in order to clean that out.
Good God.
Yeah. So we do this for hygienic reasons, right? That doesn't sound very hygienic to me.
That's not funny.
No, it's
That's not funny. Yeah.
I can only imagine how it feels when they're getting an erection that's tugging between here and there, as the erection occurs, or even having sex, and they're rightfully afraid of getting it corrected because they're still going to end up with scar tissue on their glands, whether they get it all cut off there or not. So. Then what also is an occurrence is erectile dysfunction. Now, erectile dysfunction is caused by one or two things, or maybe both things together. Something physically wrong, right? If you're physically missing a lot of your highly erogenous tissue, then, well, that might be a reason why you might be having erectile dysfunction. It's not feeling good enough to care, right? But if you also start learning or realizing how you're harmed by the fact that you are circumcised, that starts messing with your biggest sexual organ of all, your brain, right?
Brain, yeah. Yes.
So yeah, thinking about it is definitely not going to help enhance the mood and get you more of an erection.
No.
So I don't know what the sales statistics are of Viagra in Europe, but from what I understand, the U.S. has sells more of it than anywhere.
Good grief. That's a very sad statistic.
Yeah. And then there's premature ejaculation. This one, I came up and just realized as I was doing these interviews with people. So the frenulum is like a really hot spot, and that's been verified by the Sorrells study and all that. And people, men will talk about it. That's the spot that really gets going when they're getting close to ejaculating, right? Well, that's inside here. It's protected. It's not being touched yet when there's coverage. Now, various men have different amounts of coverage when they're erect, but the idea here is when you inject and when you start going inside of a vagina, that still is not touching anything except for itself until it gets out here and gets closer to the inside of the vagina, to the uterus, where you want the semen to go in order to impregnate the woman. Well, the nature is thinking here, right? So you get that far in, and then the frenulum is being activated, not beforehand. So you don't want to ejaculate here; you want to ejaculate there.
Yes.
So it's kind of funny that some guys or women think that the guy's going to last longer if he's circumcised, because he has less sensitive tissue that way. It's more complex than that.
My friend who's a Muslim, and he was cut when he was I think he was 6 months old, and he said to me that by touching that is the only way that he can have an orgasm. He's got no feeling anywhere else.
Yeah.
Now, when people say things like that to you, I think I'm a very open person. I'm a very easy person to talk to. So I think that people know that, you know, nothing's really going to shock me. And I do have a decent amount of empathy towards people. So I think that's, you know, some of the skills I've got in life that, you know, men do tend to talk to me about stuff, you know. So I think that's why you know, but anyway, the issue is that when I was told that, it's all like stuff that just opens up your eyes and it goes down to one thing, the same thing of being cut. And you're like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
This is so bad. These people should not be experiencing things like this. But the amount of ignorance, I mean, okay, right. I was, if I've got a short little story I can tell you. There's things that you hear that are harrowing, which I probably have more access to than you because of living and working in London for so long. And as I said to you before, it's very multicultural, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Now, somebody at work, we were talking and we were working away, and then, but it was the kind of repetitive job where you could have proper conversations. This guy was talking, and he said, when I was 9, I was in the toilet, a public toilet, and my uncle was beside me, and he said he saw my penis and I had been cut, and they were a Pakistani family, and 2 days later, his uncle came round to the house, and his father and uncle held him down on the kitchen table while they performed circumcision on him
Oh man.
at 9 years old.
Yeah.
Now, hold on. If you fail to be moved by that, you're a very hard, cold person, I think. These are things that cause such psychological scars
Or,
on
or
people.
or you simply been bought into the idea that it's vestigial skin that's useless or problematic or
Yeah.
whatever. You know,
Well,
that's the only
uh,
way.
his view is, he said, well, they do that to you. He said, so when you look down at it, you know you'll always be a Muslim or you'll always be a Jew, because that's, you know, and it's like, it's quite an extreme view, you
Yep.
know. I mean,
Yep.
I'm not from either of those, so I don't, you know. I think one of the worst ones I ever heard, you know what, was when somebody turned around and said, well, if it was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for
Oh.
my kids. And you're like, "Mm, don't you think then that you're wasting your time when when you get somebody that says that to you? I don't mean to be laughing in a funny, but you're just like, you might as well just go and bang your head against a brick wall, because you're not going to get through to someone that actually thinks like that, you know. I don't know. Is this
Yeah.
I don't know, is this of help to you, to these things that
Uh,
I've
I don't
heard?
know. I'll when I start trimming the videos and all. I mean, it's this definitely gonna be an interesting talk for people that are going to watch the entire interview.
On
But
cultural things,
yeah,
cultural influences on people.
I'm actually from Seattle primarily. I've been there most of my life, and yeah, I've traveled to lots of places in the U.S. and Canada, and of all the places, I still find Seattle to be one of the most multicultural places, at least in North America. So yeah, it's been interesting. I did meet one. Well, I met multiple, but one I talked to in depth about this. He was Muslim, and I started explaining to him how the intact penis works in comparison. And I covered just like one of those things I just listed off earlier, and he was like, "No, really? I really? You know, I mean, I would have had that if I would have been left intact." And it's like, "Yeah, man, that pisses me off." I mean, I would have liked to have that feature, you know. Um, so
None of the males in his family would know that, would they?
because they don't talk about it, no one talks about this.
Yeah, and no, but they wouldn't know about it because they're all
Yeah.
circumcised.
Yeah, it's been going
I'm a
on for,
baby, and they don't know anymore.
yeah, it's been going on for, ever and ever. So yeah, my dad didn't know any of this stuff. He never told me about any of this stuff. My grandfather, either of my grandfathers, they never talked about this stuff. So I know my father-in-law was intact, but he really kind of, he got into, he started having Alzheimer's before I even thought to talk to him about it. But he lived his entire life with his penis intact and didn't have trouble. So, it's kind of crazy, I think, for people to use excuses that they're going to end up with this disease or that disease. Like, you have just as much chance of diseases of the penis as you do lots of other body parts. So preemptively cutting it off just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's just illogical. So you were talking about how your friend said that he has to manipulate the frenulum
Yeah.
to
Yes.
get to
Yeah.
to get to orgasm, and that kind of gets into the botches here. The last thing, there's different tools that are used to do the cutting. There's a Jewish barzel where they just slide, they pull the skin up and they slide the barzel over it, and it's just slides in there, and then they slice right with a knife. Then there's this clamp called Mogen Clamp that was created that a little bit more medical behind it, makes some sense. That it, after they slide it on, then they squeeze it close, and they put a thing over on the end to clamp it off, and they leave it clamped like that, so you get blood coagulation, so you have less chances of bleeding afterwards. Makes sense to a certain point. But the problem with both of those is that they could, if they don't put it on in the right place, it might harm the glands. In fact, Mogen Clamp the business was sued out of existence because this sort of thing happened too often. It's crazy that they've been using Mogen Clamp in Africa lately to go address the HIV, issue down there. But also the clamps could be, if it's not put on perfectly straight, if the penis is like bent one way or another or whatever, and then the clamp ends up going at an angle in any way, then you end up having too little bit of skin on one side or the other, so you end up having curved penises during erections.
Good grief.
Very, very common thing that people say. You can see it. You watch enough porn, you'll see it. It happens a lot.
Well, I was out with some friends, and we were talking friends of friends, and actually I don't know, when you have a drink, all kinds of things get talked about, and well, this guy was a urologist, and he started talking, and he was saying about stuff, and he said, okay, in my job, he said, the other thing is you've got to think about, he said, fundamentally, on men's anatomy, men are different shapes. Their glands are different, and the structure is different. Because he's saying like, oh, genitals are like faces. They are different.
Yep.
This is what children have this worry about, don't they? When they're getting older, the teenage boys and girls, and they think, oh, my vagina's not normal. Oh, my penis is not normal. These are just things that happen because you just think, and children talk a load of rubbish. Well, he said to me, to be honest, he said, some penises are just not suitable for cutting.
Yeah.
Because they're just the anatomy of them, the shape of them. He's basically saying, if you think of it from a cosmetic point of view, I can't do a good job on that.
Yeah.
Now, I've never heard anything like that before. And that was like, wow, he probably was only just saying things like that because he'd had a couple of glasses of wine. But it was like quite fascinating. It's sad, yet another sad thing. But to hear something like that said, you know what I mean? Because it's not supposed, I don't need to say any more on that. You understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So again, you were talking about your friend who had to manipulate his frenulum area to get an orgasm.
Yes.
So one of the things was going to point out is with these clamps that where they pull the skin up and they slide it off. You can also look at how the Zosa do it, out in the bush, or whatever. They pull and they slice, right?
The who?
The Zosa is the Xosa. It's down in Africa. It's an African tribe that they do it when they're 15, 16, 17 years old, and that's like
Okay.
it's a passage to being a man.
I know the Maasai do. Yeah, Maasai do in Kenya.
I think they
They sing songs about it. Bless them.
Yeah. So there's an upside to it though, to doing it that way. When you do it that way, the inner mucosa is intact, and I'm pretty sure I was cut with a Mogen clamp, because I have, when you look at the colors of the previously amputated penis, you can see two tones, right? And this tone up here varies in size. And you pretty well, if you look at, if you can tell which guys were cut that way with a, like a Mogen clamp or a barzel or something, versus a guy that's been cut with a Bell method, being the Gomco clamp or the Plastibell, for example. I'm not sure how the chain ring works exactly, but those two, where they place the bell down on top of the glands, and the idea there is to protect the gland, because, well, hey, there's a Mogen clamp that damage the gland, so we'll try to protect the glands. But it goes down here, and then they end up cutting much closer. All right, they end up cutting off instead of cutting the skin here. All right, instead of cutting the skin that would end up down here after they pulled it up to cut it off, they end up cutting the skin that's closer to the glands, removing far more of the inner mucosa. So what that means to the frenular area, so you got the frenular area, and this is not a super good explanation of, but you could go look at real intact penises and you see how the frenulum kind of stretches down and reaches down onto the inner mucosa in order to pull it up. So the whole frenular area is a very, very sensitive area, and you can look at the Sorrells study to see how this is explained and all that. But again, that's a very sensitive area. If you cut with a Bell method, then you have less frenular area left. And I've heard of other guys talk about how they were cut like freehanded or whatever, where the butcher actually like took a knife and went up right underneath the corona and up and down and carved out all of the frenular area. So there's no frenulum nerves left. And John Geisker said that guys that cut like that end up just being basically impotent. So yeah. You go out to circumcisionharm.org and see many other botches that have occurred, and many other men have shared pictures, their botches and stories about how it affects them and all that. Of course, if you're cut as an infant, you have nothing really to compare it with too much other than stories from others. So
yes,
about how it works. And I've been thankful to intact men like yourself that share with me how things work, with the normal intact penis. Because then, I get it from the horse's mouth that way. I actually have a group on Facebook. I don't know if you're in it or not, called Intact Male Intactivists. And like I post questions.
I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll make sure you
If
are.
I am, it wouldn't be. If I am, it wouldn't be for long. It wouldn't have been very long.
Okay.
But no, maybe I did. But I mean, I find it's so taboo, and it's so cruel. I mean, especially in the United Kingdom, we're not very good about talking about sex. I mean, up here in Scotland, it's even worse.
Right.
They don't express themselves about anything. So I was talking to a neighbour in the summer, and he was saying to me, he said, I've never been able to speak to another guy about when I've had problems, with my body and ailments and stuff. And I said, well, a lot of men feel really uncomfortable about talking about it.
Yeah.
I said, it doesn't bother me at all. Our bodies are bodies. They go wrong. We have things, you know. I don't have any problem talking about it. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I said, if I can talk to you, if it's something similar that I've experienced, then I don't have a problem sharing that with you, especially if it'll help you and you'll sort of won't think, oh, well, that's just odd. Because sometimes doctors don't tell you enough.
No,
They really
they
don't.
don't.
I don't know about in America, but here they
Oh,
just don't tell you enough.
it's
And
horrible.
you have to try and, yeah.
That's part of what drives me is my wife's OB provided zero information, not a
Oh,
bit. Even after she, tried to get all information from him, he didn't provide any information. And I've come to find out that this is a very common thing where doctors they either avoid it or they don't know it or whatever. They don't provide any information when it comes up to the question. And according to Intact America, they did a survey and found 94% of hospitals push it, and they don't tell parents about the risks, and they don't tell parents about the harms or any of that. They just talk about the medical benefits or whatever.
medical benefits.
Yeah, the
Okay.
purported medical benefits, but no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think the tide is turning properly? It seems to be in America. It seems to be.
I get different feelings about it sometimes. I'm happy to see more and more people speaking out on Twitter about it. It seems to be a more common theme where people say, no, this should be left up to the individual to decide for themselves when they get older, at the very least. So, and there's also more extreme people saying this is absolutely horrible that's being done, whatever.
I mean, in this day and age, in this world, the biggest friends that we could have in this sort of thing, because if there's a lot of shallowness about celebrity, is some famous people speaking out. I'm sure that would work. That would work just as well in America as it would in the UK.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
depending on people's stupidity as well, what they might, but they're more likely to listen to somebody that they've enjoyed watching on a film or something like that. I know it sounds shallow, but no, to your average person, that will work because in their heads, they trust the person.
Look at our politics. In the United States, is the popular person that gets voted into the president's office half the time, instead of someone that's actually more, rightfully do the job.
Well, I can't talk about a certain president without getting rather angry. To be honest,
but yeah, that's a perfect example,
don't get
though.
it.
And there are intact. I mean, there are several men several people that have spoke out about this. In fact, a singer, a well-known singer, Ed had long hair, beautiful. Recently did a TikTok, and that went viral.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she talked about how she was just stunned by the belief that it's for hygienic reasons. Like she never saw a circumcised or circumcised penis before. It's like we have showers these days. What are you kidding?
So. Okay. In the Middle East, 2,000 years ago, when there wasn't a lot of water, okay, you could understand to a certain extent why they want to do it. But I mean, that was just it was done because it was a tribal thing, wasn't it? It's just another way of trying to control people. I think it's just
well, yeah.
Times have changed.
I often refer to the Aesop fable, fox with no tail. Have you heard that one?
The other thing that I should mention on here that will be maybe of use to you is to say that I've had two friends over the years that one was cut as a small child, very small, as an infant, and one was when it was about 5. And that's funny because they both said exactly the same thing, that they still, even now when they were in their 50s, right? very robbed of something.
Yeah. Yep.
And you see, there's something that I didn't get, didn't understand, because it didn't happen to me. But
Yeah.
there's plenty of other things that you can feel robbed about. But
Yeah.
It must be very, very traumatic to come to terms with the fact part of your body has been taken away without your consent.
Yeah.
And these are fundamental things that
Yeah.
people do need to acknowledge and recognize, because it's inhuman.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of all the propaganda and all the brainwashing. And
Yeah.
because, you know the story of Kellogg,
Yes. Yes. Dr. Kellogg.
one of the
Kellogg's
most
conflict.
evil.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, what
Yeah,
he
it's
did to
horrible.
those poor orphan boys.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
good heavens.
Yeah.
It's so evil, isn't it? There's no other word. There's no other word. It's just.
Yeah. They're trying to control sexuality. That's why it's all been about, really, from the roots. So they just, they've come up with some, purported medical benefits, but, it's still doesn't justify it. So.
My
Yeah.
friend's father just died, and he was 81, and he told his son, who's my best friend, that he was circumcised in the 1940s when he was born. I think it was then. I think it was 1940s. And he said to his dad, "Oh," he said, "what was that for? Was a problem?" He went, "No, it was the fashion at the time."
Yeah. Yep. Same for me. Yeah.
That's shocking, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah, like it's
trying to
choosing
equate
clothing.
it rationally. Huh?
It's like choosing clothing.
What, a stripy scarf, you mean, to
Yeah.
go with the circumcision?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. No.
Right. Go on, you go on now. I
Okay.
just feel very strongly about this, and talking
Yeah.
about it
No.
to
I appreciate
somebody, it really upsets me, because it's terrible. It's so
Yeah.
bad. And I've had very good friends have been affected for life about it,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
anyway, you go on.
It's what leads to a lot of intactivists getting burnt out, is that this is such a dark issue, and it's challenging to figure out positive ways to be involved in this. I try to joke a little bit about some of the dumb things that other people say to support and promote this, in order to make light of it and all, to make this somewhat fun and entertaining, but it's still hard. So
I think you're very brave what you're doing anyway.
thank you. So that was all the physical aspects and side effects and botches. I'm feeling like I missed some of the other botches that occur, but it's not very hard to go out and look for botched circumcisions and find all sorts of problems. The next section is about sexual partnerships, and the first part is heterosexual partnerships, penis to vagina. And I actually created a video. It's on my YouTube channel, but I use the finger, and it's like you take your finger and try to stick it in your fist. You start feeling the drag, the friction right away. You can't. It's not easy to stick your finger into your fist, right? But I took a little double-sided tape, put it on my fingertip, and then I cut off a finger off of a rubber glove and stuck it on my finger. And then I put a little bit of Vaseline on the end to represent the lubrication that would be on the glands. And then I double rolled it over the end of the finger, and then I just boop. So, okay, people, try this at home and see the difference of how it works. And so the idea of the rolling mechanism and the lubrication on the penis, and women attest to this too, improves improves sex, because you have far less friction. You have less friction when it comes to getting started. Personally, I've had a couple partners where we get too excited or whatever, and we want to jump right into things, and she wasn't, fully lubricated on the, the labial area, and if I push too hard too fast, then I end up tearing her.
Wow.
Yeah. And then what also occurs is that even after having sex for so many minutes or whatever, because the lubrication is being drawn out with a penis instead of staying inside, because this kind of acts like a Dr. Doe on Sexplanations, and there's a YouTube channel called Sexplanations, calls it a space dock. It's like because it's sliding back and forth with the movement, like that. There's less bringing the lubrication out, so it stays inside, right? Some people also blame the coronal ridge of the glands for kind of scooping it out every time it goes out, and then it dries out and go back in, and the vagina gets drier and drier. And one person I reviewed said, yes, like gets to be like rug burn. so yeah, it affects heterosex, and even more so anal sex. I think that most people that do anal sex, they typically get the lubrication out, KY jelly or whatever you want to use, and use that to do anal sex. But if you have the rolling mechanism and the lubrication that's inside the inner mucosa and the glands, it's a whole lot easier to have anal sex and use natural lube, which is the best. Better than that commercial stuff, right?
No comment.
I hear you. And then the last is for those who are homosexual, gays. There's this thing they call docking. Jim Jeffries covered this on one of his episodes, where he was tackling intactivists, one in particular, Elon Sevroni from Israel, who's like the bravest guy I know in the world. He goes out and protests quite often by himself in Israel, like I think in Tel Aviv is where he lives at, against circumcision. So Jim Jeffries made a video of him and kind of mocked him, and Jonathan Conte and some other intactivists, and he did talk about docking, and well, docking is basically impossible without the male prepuce being in place.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just
I know about it. Yeah.
crossing swords, right?
Unlubed swords. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, because, but if it's done with one person that is intact and one person isn't, I know it's an amazing experience for the person that
I bet
has been cut.
Yeah.
Which
probably also makes them angry, because it's like, well, I wish I had that. Right?
I don't know about that side of it, but I know I think it's just I think it's a very informative experience for that person, and don't know, maybe I don't know, don't know if everyone will react in a different way, but it just gives you a perception of what it should be like, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. I have there's some friends of mine, a gay couple, and one's intact and one's not, and the one that's not, he absolutely hates that he's cut. He's so severely cut, he can't restore or do much about it. So
I've got a friend who was cut, and he is so traumatized by it. He's gay. He cannot have sex with the man that's uncut. It's too it's
Yeah.
too traumatic. It upsets him too much.
Yeah.
It's not because it's nothing to do with aesthetically
Mhm.
what he likes.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's to do with, you know,
It's traumatizing,
it's to,
triggering.
I think it's the fact of waking up 7 years old on a trolley with a bit of toilet tissue wrapped around your penis. I think that's a lot to do with his problem, don't you?
Maybe. um, yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine, and thanks for sharing that, because that's, that shows how this isn't just affecting the man or the person that's been cut. It's affecting potential partnerships too. It reduces, you know.
Well, it's
re-
limiting who. I mean, I'm not being funny, but I don't know what's it like between men and women. Do like, it's an awkward thing to ask, isn't it? If you're going out with a date with a woman and then you go on a couple of dates and she turns around and she says, have you got a foreskin or not? It's a bit like, and it's. I don't think it's as difficult between men, to be honest, but it still must be a bit awkward, and it's like saying, because he's got to turn around and say, well, I think you're a really nice guy, but it's not going to work.
Mhm.
We could be friends, which
Yeah,
is, it's really difficult and it's really sad. It's really sad
very sad.
and it's wrong. It makes me angry,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Wouldn't
But
it be nice if we didn't have a status of our genitalia? you know, if we were all just had what we were born with, it wouldn't even be a question.
yeah, but it goes back to a lot of things, don't you think? There's a bit more. There's more than that even. I don't like all the boxes and the category. I mean, I use the word straight and gay because there's no alternative. But I don't like all the separatism of it.
And
And
there's bisexual too, but yeah,
yeah, but there's different degrees as well, isn't there, of that? And
yeah,
you
oh
know,
yeah, for sure.
we're just limited by the boxes that a lot of us have to live in.
Yeah.
So carry on.
Okay. So the next major section is about the psychological effects that go on, starting with the trauma from the cut itself. Some people argue, well, my baby didn't cry, or my baby slept through it, or whatever. Maybe, maybe not. It seems that there's been studies that have been done that, or started at least, where they've figured out that, yeah, this is, especially when not done with anesthesia, it's extremely traumatizing to the child. And they had to stop because they figured out that, yeah, it's definitely torturing the child when not done with anesthesia, as one of the studies that was done. I think there's probably a lot of room for doing more studies on this, but I don't know how they're gonna how they would ever do studies on this without immediately finding the ethical problem of doing this. Period. It shouldn't even be something to be considered, honestly. Some men, like myself, have identified that we have had dreams that we account to that occurrence, that thing happening in our lives. In fact, this guy, I don't know if you've seen his book yet. This book right here by Jay Jackson.
Right.
He talks about how he's had dreams most of his life, and he, after enough analysis of when they started and other dreams and traumatic things that happened in his life, it only makes sense that it came from when he was cut as a baby. And I myself have had dreams through my childhood and even into my 20s where I was paralyzed, or I felt like I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And someone was approaching me, and I knew something bad was about to happen to me. I never know in the dreams, but I just know that something bad is about to happen to me, and I always wake up, nightmare. So,
Good
and
grief.
I've heard of other stories too, where men have been like hypnotized or whatever, and traced it back. Brendan Marotta, the guy that put together the American Circumcision documentary, even has talked about how he's done some healing work and all that, and connected pain down there. So there's a lot to, a lot that people can look up on that if they want to. To me, I've seen enough videos of it to say, yeah, that baby is definitely traumatized. In fact, in a lot of cases, the babies, I think, go into shock and check out.
So it's normal, is it, to tie baby's arms and legs down? Is that normal? But baby's arms and legs never stay still when they're newborn, hardly ever. So
Yeah.
it's not traumatic for a child to be tied down. Get out of here.
I don't know how to use the word normal for much of anything. This practice seems to vary depending on the butcher that's doing the cutting, drastically. Sometimes someone holds the baby and holds, the legs back or the arms back or whatever. Sometimes they strap them down onto a circumrestraint board.
I think that album cover should be banned as well. That one, Nirvana with the baby in the water, that should be banned. That's wrong.
Yeah.
That also makes people think that it's normal for a penis to look like that.
I thought that penis was intact.
No.
And then Nirvana. Oh,
No,
okay.
it most definitely isn't.
Oh,
I was so
maybe.
shocked when I saw it. I thought,
Yeah.
well, that had to be America. It wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Pink.
Look it up and you'll see.
Yeah. Maybe I'll go again. Pink shared a picture on Instagram of her boy being naked, and the intactivist jumped on that. And then later, myself and several other intactivists went to Portland when she was
Why?
performing.
What was the baby? Uncut or cut?
The baby's cut. Yeah.
Oh.
So the intactivists were harassing her for having, mutilated her boy's penis. So, yeah. And then you have the trauma from the discoveries of the loss and the harm. I didn't really start discovering the losses, the harm. I didn't make the connection between how I'm harmed, or I was 35 when I became a dad, and that's when I started looking into this topic and starting to compare how the normal intact penis works compared to mine, and I made connections bit by bit over time, and every time I learn something new about what I'm missing and make a connection in my head about how things would have been different for me in my my young years, and all, it was traumatic for me. I'd kind of I learned that little bit of information, then I'd check out of studying anymore, and I'm introverted, so I started processing all this internally, and I look at it as the stages of grief that people go through when they're traumatized, right? And I think that internally I went through all of that, and then I come back out of it, and then I learned something else. And there's many cases of men talking about the same thing as they started studying this and started looking at how things work differently, all that, and have dealt with their own trauma over this. And sometimes that leads to suicide. And intactivists like you and I have heard of guys like Alex Hardy, Jonathan Conte, David Reamer. I've done 2 interviews with people that have been connected to suicides that have occurred not too long ago. And one was most definitely highly connected to this trauma. And another She's not absolutely positive because her husband didn't talk about it enough. She just knows that her husband was mad that he was generally cut as a child, and she stood up to protect her son. So.
God.
And this, the psychological effects on children too. As I've been using Greta Thunberg a lot lately, because I read her dad's story about how she went into depressive state after learning in school about the problems with the planet and all that, and how its temperature's changing or whatever. But I've seen several videos, and I've been with people where they bring their children to protest, and some of these children will hold signs themselves and speak out. And my own sons have joined me on multiple cases to speak out, and I feel bad that they see this going on in our world, right? It's no fun to learn that your world is full of barbarism still, even after all that how far humanity has come over the thousands of years prior. But on the flip side of it, I'm happy to have my kids joining me and feeling empowered to speak out, because I want them to feel like they have a voice in the world. And that was the same thing with Greta Thunberg that led her to the UN. She came out of her depressive state when she started, holding a sign, sharing her feelings about the topic. And then we have medical professionals. I don't know about you in Scotland, but here in the United States, a large percentage of medical professionals condone this, or even promote it, or maybe even perform it. And I personally could not have a doctor like that be my doctor if they are ethically okay with that. Because if they're ethically
Well, how it
okay with that,
works over here is a doctor would make a decision like that. We call them GPs. I don't know what you call them. We call them a general practitioner. You go along to see your doctor and you show them that. And as far as they're concerned, they're just general. They don't know enough about it. So basically you get referred to urology at a hospital.
Yeah.
And that's how it would work here. But if you look up the British Medical Association, they are very much against it.
Yeah.
Have you heard about what they've tried to do in Europe as well? There's been several countries in Scandinavia and Iceland that have been trying to make it illegal for
Denmark
children.
and Iceland have both considered it. In fact, I've watched a 4-hour debate in Iceland over the topic. It was overwhelmingly Jewish people trying to defend their practice.
Then go to another country where it's allowed then,
Or Brit Shalom.
So, I mean,
do something different.
There's an argument. Okay, yes, it's a religious right, but when it first happened, we were ignorant. We're not ignorant anymore, and times should change, and things should be modernized. Judaism should be modernized, basically. I mean, there's nothing in the Torah that says anyone should be harmed.
Yeah.
Really, there isn't. So if it was just, brought up to date, I'm sure there's something else they could do ceremonially instead of it.
Yeah.
Surely, I mean, I think over time, the more education they get and the more medical, I mean, the fact that babies die because of it is hideous alone. But the thing that's got me about like Kenya, a man goes round to different villages, brings the kids into a hut and he does it with a knife.
Yeah.
And because of the lack of hygiene, they've caught things.
Mm-hmm.
They've caught HIV, they've caught herpes, all kinds of things through lack of hygiene and ignorance. And I mean, what was it? I watched a program some years ago about Mali in West Africa, and they went to a village. And this is how basic. The girls and boys were all circumcised at 12 or 13 years old by, are you ready? The village blacksmith.
Gosh.
Because he had the instrument, the tools that could be kept that were hygienic through like heat and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing advanced about these people that lived in the village. But basically, the grandmother, the mother turned around and said, if my daughter's not circumcised, then the sky will fall in. I wish I was making this up.
I believe you. I truly believe you. It's even it just doesn't. It doesn't fit for me in my brain. It's like it's just a circular problem for me that this was even introduced into a religion at all. It doesn't make sense to me at all that God
Do you know
would
why
do
it's
this.
done? Do you know why it's done in a lot of places in Africa to women? Do you know what? Do you know? I take it you know why.
I have some theories and things I've heard, but maybe
Well, apparently the truth is that my friend, she's from Lebanon, and she told me that she knows it's done in areas because what they do is because they cut the clitoris out and then they sew it up. So basically, one, it makes it more pleasurable for the man because it makes it much tighter. And because she's got no clitoris, she'll get no pleasure from it. So she's not going to stray.
Yeah.
It's to stop her committing adultery.
Mm-hmm. Well, again,
Well,
control, and I get down
amount
on
of
that.
I mean, the levels that's wrong. It's could be here all night.
Yeah, well, it's
Being a
all the
woman and
general cutting practices. When you look back, when you look at where they came from, it's all about control. And at the root of
yeah,
all of them is control. Just like you were talking about Kellogg's, you wanted to control masturbation for
God,
both boys and girls. So, so yeah, I think there's probably that's definitely one reason that they give, but I think that it's tied as well to MGM, the male cutting, because the males are getting cut, so the females should be cut too, right? Or the males are getting cut because in order to be closer to God, or because it says in the religious text, they males need it or whatever. Well, why don't females need it too? There's so many theories about how it really got going. But when it comes down to
well,
it got going for whatever reasons, and the reasons now are not justifiable. Period. So let's just stop doing it.
I can. Can we go back to another subject or something I've remembered that you might
Yeah.
find that's different of interest?
Okay.
That's due to somebody being cut.
Okay.
Where was I reading? I was reading about the fact that they were talking about surveys that they'd done in the United Kingdom and in America and comparing them about gay men's sexual activities, studying, and they were equating it with men that were cut and not. And it was basically they were saying that anal sex is more frequent in America with gay men because of being circumcised, and they have got less options on how they can have an orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
To do with like having anal sex will make it a much easier way for them to reach an orgasm, as opposed to a lot of men are cut that oral sex doesn't do anything for them.
Yeah. So
and this is so wrong again.
Yeah.
because it's exposed all the time and it's going to lose its sensitivity rubbing up against clothes and
Yeah, the glands should be sensitive too. But that relates to, I'm jumping forward here with relationships, but pedophilia as well. I've had the same theory about pedophilia being increased by this practice, because if men are missing a large chunk of their sensitive skin, and or their penises, the glands is desensitized over time from keratinization, what they're left with is pressure, right? So instead of having the Myers corpuscles, the light touch sensitivity, they have pressure that they depend on to get to orgasm.
yeah,
So
okay,
that draws them to wanting tighter orifices to work with.
yes,
So the thinking is that younger
wow,
women have tighter vaginas. So
okay, yeah,
another reason for an older man to be attracted to a young woman. And also,
ah,
here's a correlation for you. Look at the
oh,
places in the world where forced marriages occur to young girls.
Saudi Arabia,
Everywhere that I know of that where that occurs, male or genital cutting cultures, genital cutting rituals also occur. You don't hear about this sort
you're
of thing
right,
in Russia or South
you're right,
America. I don't think it happens either in China too, right? It's,
no,
they did foot binding in China, but they stopped that, right? So
they're more, they're on the mental side of torturing people rather than physical. That's their speciality.
yeah, maybe. Mm,
I do, and the more I've spoken to you, the more I think you're very brave
thank you.
for doing this, because it must be very difficult. And it's unselfish of you to try and make things better, because the idea of, well, it's not just children being harmed, it's everyone being harmed.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
what was
that's
that?
fine.
There was a something the other day about this guy was, this nurse, that was it, a nurse, a male nurse, saying that they put this, was it a cream, an anesthetic cream they put on the penis before they did the cutting, and he said that 9 times out of 10 it wasn't administered long enough for it to have an effect.
Yeah.
And you're like, because it's like treating a baby like an animal that
Mhm.
can't tell you and can't complain.
Yeah.
This is what's really cowardly, I think, about as well, about the fact,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And the baby is not likely to remember enough later on to come back and tackle you over it, right? I compare
What?
it to going to the dentist. When they shoot you up to work on your tooth, and they leave it for a few minutes, and then come back, and they
Yeah,
ask you, "Can you feel it?" and all
that's
that,
right.
and you say, "Yeah, no, it's numb. I don't feel anything or whatever," and then they go to work. Well, with a baby, they don't do that. They can't. I mean, the baby's not going to necessarily tell you.
No, no. Yeah. So, what is it you hope to achieve by doing what you're doing with the? Is it like a what will it be, like a documentary, or
Docu
just
series. I was starting out with the
right?
idea of documentary, but uh, it's just too huge to try to cover the harms. And I created a set of really short videos where I explained all the physical aspects, right? And I've got
Yes.
a YouTube playlist that just covers that. So they're really quick and short, and you just watch one at a time, and watch whichever ones you want to watch, and be done with it. And maybe that'll satisfy you as to the fact that, yeah, this is harmful. But I thought, well, the harms go beyond the physical, right? And goes beyond just the individual that been cut. It's much bigger than that. And I love the American Circumcision documentary. In fact, I've interviewed with Brendan last week, um, the director of the film. But it really does a great job of taking care of the debate. but I went away from it feeling like there's not enough information about the harms, and thinking that maybe people after watching it walk away from it thinking, well, is it really that harmful though? Is it, I don't see a whole lot of men complaining about it, so it must not be that bad because there's so many men that are cut, but they're not complaining. And my first response to that is, well, first of all, most men were cut as infants, so they have nothing to compare it to, so they don't know to complain.
Exactly.
I didn't know to complain,
Exactly.
right? And then
But you're a
here's
man. You're not supposed to complain.
there's that
You're
too.
supposed to get on with it.
Yeah, I have a
You're supposed to
video
be a
on my
hard man.
channel that just talks about that aspect about men do not complain and why. So why they don't complain. So anyways, so I think we were talking about the psychological effects on medical professionals. I think I did. I jumped to the relationships with medical professionals, but there's a psychological effect on medical professionals that, especially, particularly the ones that know this is harmful. Now, I think a lot of medical professionals turn off the empathetic part of their brain in order to focus on their job and just get the work done, so they're more efficient and all that, and don't get all burnt out from the emotional part of their job. But there's been several medical professionals that have been involved in our movement, and they are psychologically affected. Some of them have left hospitals or clinics, whatever, that do it because they can't handle the fact that it's being done. Several medical professionals have shared their uh, their stories about it all too. And then we have parents that are psychologically affected. Me being one of them. I'm a dad of two, but they're intact, but only by the hair of my chinny chin chin. It was on the 11th hour that we actually got information from anyone about the information, or about this procedure, this practice. I consider it now just a ritual practice. And I think I was explaining earlier that my wife was provided with zero information from the OB about it. It was someone else that provided us information that led us to keeping our sons intact. And thus, I'm extremely thankful for Intactivist, and here I am being one myself now. But there's also many regret parents in the movement. Marilyn Milos and oh gosh, I'm going blank on her name right now. In fact, it was her birthday, or not her birthday. She passed away a year ago today. Anyways, most people don't know who I'm talking about, but she wrote a book about the topic, and it has a whole website about it. And there's been one person I interviewed who has one cut and one intact boy, and she's shared her feelings about this too. And then there's intact men like yourself, Paul, that are affected by this. And I mean, you shouldn't have to be doing this with me right now. You shouldn't have to be fighting for the rights of children. You shouldn't have to be debunking the myths around the intact, normal, natural penis. That it's dirty, unhygienic, prone to disease, cheese dick, anteater, all that great stuff that is, shaming of the intact man. And you shouldn't have to deal with that.
Well, women have it too, don't they? Women have smegma as well, and they have it as well.
A lot
and
more.
it's like, well, nobody would actually turn around and say, well, we should cut that area out to stop that happening, because, well, I mean,
barbaric.
Oh, is it really? Oh, okay. So to males is not.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's called double standards, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
But
absolutely.
I mean, I tell you what really does upset me a lot is when you get ignorant women making remarks about an intact penis. And then you're like, well, you will be the first to remark about all the pressure there is in society on women looking like this and acting like that, and should be, what was it? Be have a certain norm and be in a certain way to, you know, make themselves attractive to men in society and all this. But it's okay for you to turn around and make negative remarks about a part of man's anatomy. I mean, basically, when you think about it, okay, the words that we use in the UK that are derogatory towards other men are a lot of them with a reference to your dick, your cock, your dickhead, knob, you know, and all these things. And it's like, well, you know, I'll tell you something to do with it that I do that I don't know what to do with. It's hard to explain. People have certain ways of expressing themselves, okay, and they'll swear or they'll say something. Like me as a gay man, it'll be like, well, they'll say something and they'll call you something like, the usual one is cocksucker or knob jockey or something like that, right? Now, turn it around. And I've said to straight men and say, oh, you're a sad old rug muncher, you know. And I've turned these things around to what they say about lesbians and bring it back to them. And, you know, I've said like, well, we all know you drink from the furry cup, don't we? You know, and it's like, but it makes them, okay, you view it like that, but think about it. It does make people think about what they're saying to others. That it's not funny if I said to you, you're rug muncher. It's not, it wouldn't be funny. But to say that to a lesbian, 90% of the population would find that funny and laugh at it. So what I'm saying is turning things around. So when people say things to me about that to do with men, I turn it around and say, all right then, cut that off on a woman's anatomy. Let's have some equality here. You want to be equal. I don't mean that in a harsh way. I mean that in just an example to get things into proportion on how we should be.
It's identifying that hypocrisy for sure.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, anyway, so, well, as you can tell, I've got a lot of strong views about stuff, and
for sure,
I think that there's so much injustice around, and I also, because I think this is a subject that is very common and very much neglected, and that's another reason why I'm interested to get involved in it, because there's so many people out there. Can I tell you one little story about what happened to a friend when he went on holiday?
Please.
It's not very nice, I warn you. He went on holiday to Turkey. And while he was in Turkey, he was there for a couple of weeks, and he got friends with two people that he made friends with a Turkish couple, right? So anyway, they invited him to a party in a restaurant. And he didn't ask why, thought it was a birthday. Well, in Turkey,
I know where that's going.
You know where it's going, don't you?
Yeah, I've heard about what they do in Turkey.
In a restaurant. In a restaurant on a table. And they make it clean. And they hold the boy down. And they all have they all watch, they all have a party. No anesthetic, nothing. And he actually took a video. And the child was outside screaming his head off afterwards in absolute agony. And they do that to every male in Turkey. And someone said to me, if it wasn't for a religious reason, it would be barbaric and it would never be allowed.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're celebrating this.
Yeah.
As you said earlier on, rite of passage.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want that passage.
Thank you
You
very
know,
much.
I really don't want that passage. But I mean, it's like, there you go. See, over time, you hear things,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm told stuff, and you're like, they're all hideous.
Yeah. Now imagine
So
that.
many human rights are just so rubbish.
Yeah. And how risky would it be for a man in Turkey to speak out against this? If I get his
They're
head chopped
very,
off,
very
right?
much.
Yeah.
They're very macho over there.
Yep.
Very macho. Yes, and what was it? Their view is their way of thinking about things is also to do with. I was told that when you get men that sleep with other men, you've got the different roles.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, they do. What was it in America? They call themselves, don't they? They say top or bottom, or
Yeah.
I can't remember the other one. Well,
Yeah.
guess what it is in Turkey? It's positive and negative.
Seriously? That's weird.
Yeah, that's what they call. That gives you an idea of how they're thinking, doesn't it?
Mhm.
That if you like to receive, that obviously makes you negative.
Yeah.
It's all part of sexuality and how wrong it is, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean,
Yeah. All about
it's
shaming
all
sexuality.
related in different ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it is.
You
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah, and
you
that's part of why
can't
I'm
go
doing this.
into like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Poor little kids.
Yeah.
Thank God you had the sense. I bet you are so pleased because your children are going to thank you in years to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Now, we
Was your
sometimes.
wife in total agreement with you?
Actually, she was the one to push me to look into this information.
Bless her. She's awesome.
She's in some ways she's very regretful that she did, because I've become this very avid activist, or avid advocate for genital autonomy. So I'm spending a lot of my time doing this now, and she's and I, it's brought up, and she's become a burnt out advocate herself, and yeah. So in some ways she's regretful about sending me down that rabbit hole, but she didn't want to make the decision by herself.
When
So
she says that to you again, just say, if we've actually been able to stop it happened once, it's been worth it.
Yeah. She advocates from time to time still when she gets a chance, but she being burnt out like a lot of activists, and you come across people that are coming up with the bad excuses, and it becoming a hot debate and all that is that's the kind of thing that burns people out. So
I think I have to be careful because I get angry when I hear stuff, and I have to hold back until I've calmed down, or I really could go for it and get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I can't help that. I feel, as you can tell, I feel very strongly about it, and it's also, there's all things around it. I hate the fact it's done for money.
Yeah.
It's done against people's will without any say because it's cowardly.
Yeah.
All these things that, and I'm not embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah. And
That's the other thing.
that sort of anger, it goes all the way around. Again, we're sitting here talking about the psychological impacts, and that ends up getting people booted from or canceled from Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or whatever, because you end up saying things that don't fit their standards, their community standards or whatever. So
Tough.
yeah, it's frustrating because we want we need people to see that there are angry people about this. But as soon as if they say something wrong out of the anger, then they get booted from whatever groups or social media or whatever. Yeah, and
The tide will change. The tide will change because also the fact of, also remember as well now, with the generations coming along, every generation comes along, less and less people are involved to do with religion. And I don't want any part of it. And that is happening naturally.
Yeah, it seems
that,
to be.
It is, yeah. So
Yeah,
a lot of the problems in the countries is cultural problems.
Yeah,
They're culturally backward.
Yeah,
Sorry, but they
I've
are.
been identified as a follower of the way, because I find what Jesus
You're a
did,
what?
follower of the way. It's basically following Jesus, and
Right.
his teachings and everything like that. I I find the things that he said and everything, positive. I like a lot of what it said. One of the things that he says that really applies to me in this movement is what you do for the least of these, you do for me. And I feel that I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking of it. When I see other advocates speaking out to protect children, I feel like it's being done for me. I mean, the same feelings go on inside of me when
Okay.
someone does something kind for me. I feel the same feelings when they're doing something kind for someone else, particularly when it comes to um, genital autonomy, because I'm angry that I was cut. So even though you can't change anything about the fact that I'm cut, but you're protecting the next generation, and that really touches me. So
Yeah, that's important.
yeah, another thing that Jesus did that I talk about a lot in this movement is Jesus was one to hang out with sinners. And to me, the reason why he did that is because it's kind of useless to just hang out with the rabbis and talk within an echo chamber. You want to do something in the world, you go get in front of the people that need a change of heart, right?
Yeah, that's common sense. Yeah, that is common sense. I mean, I wasn't born with the faith, but I people are entitled to believe what they want to, as long as they're not bad.
Yeah,
That's fine. I mean, I personally don't need it, and so I don't want it or need it, and but I'm not stopping anyone else. If you want that and you need that, and you get something from it, then good on you.
sure.
We're all different. We all like, I don't like marzipan. You might love it. It's quite simple,
It
isn't
is.
it?
Yeah, exactly.
It is.
It is
There's
a good
only
choice.
there's only two kinds of people: good people and bad people. That's all I think now.
Yeah,
As the older I've got, the simpler I've looked at it in that respect.
yeah.
So
So in the psychological here, I call it intact men, but really I really feeling I should yank out the word men because uh, it applies. I'm sure I'm pretty much positive that in female genital cutting cultures, that intact women probably struggle too. They with shame or whatever, being shamed for not being cut. Um, so just like
I've
intact men.
seen I've seen women, African women that can't walk properly because they've been mutilated,
Yeah,
and that I could cry
yeah,
when I've seen
me
that,
too.
because you actually can physically see the effects of what's happened.
Yeah,
You don't in a man walking down the street,
yeah,
but when you see that with a woman, it's indescribable.
yeah.
It really is
Very sad.
indescribable.
I've seen plenty of pictures of boys, holding themselves right after they get cut. is very disturbing too. But, yeah.
Mm.
So, have any other ideas on how you're psychologically impacted as an intact man?
Um, I suppose sometimes I think I do feel a bit. Sometimes I feel a bit guilty because of what other people have gone through,
Yeah.
especially with two very good friends of mine and what they went through for really bad. They're they're two exceptionally nice people,
Yeah.
and you just think it's not like I wished anything to happen on me, but I mean, it's like
How
um,
did I get so lucky?
I well, it's like why did it? It's through ignorance that this has happened, right?
Yeah.
What I think how it all started with me was realizing how much I thought something what was happening was wrong, and then I got to thinking, well, all this is based on ignorance and misinformation, and then I realized how much in America it's based on making money and how much money they got for selling tissue,
Yeah.
which is wrong on so many levels. I don't even want to go into that. That
it's
I
it's
think
organ
that's a very
theft.
I think that's a very good thing to make public to people and explain that, because I think that's something that will make most people feel rather abhorrent about what's going on. And the fact that I know it's twisted, but I think it's quite hilarious that women are probably putting stuff on their faces that might have parts of men's genitals or babies' genitals on
Yeah.
them, which I think there's a bit of an irony there. But I don't mean to be facetious about it,
No.
but you've got to think in a way that, you know, oh, right, okay, you're putting that on your face. Well, love, if you knew where that came from, you know,
Yeah.
you might think twice about it. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it leaves you,
how many
it
men are
scars
missing?
you.
How many of
Yeah.
those men are out there that are missing uh, an important part of their sexuality for you to be able to put that on your face?
Don't, that really, yeah, yeah, because do you not find the hardest thing with doing what you're doing is all the denial that you come across and people won't listen?
It definitely keeps me from sleeping well sometimes, because I want to reach people, uh, and I keep trying to come up with better ways to provide information in a quick, short, concise way that will wake them up. But the reality is usually not just one thing, because people have multiple layers of cognitive dissonance about this issue,
Yeah.
right? And you might get through one, but you still have 3 more or 4 more to get through, right? So, one, you might share one story or one factoid or whatever. Okay, well, that'll break that one down. Okay, but there's all these other things. I, you have to keep on working at them to get through all of them, and they could be a very, very time-consuming process. When the American Circumcision documentary came out, I was very elated. I thought, okay, well, that really covers the debate extremely well. And before it came out, I was considering, trying to talk to people about this, and how to do so in a way that they would take the time to listen through the whole spiel, because it's not something that can be discussed in 5-10 minutes. It takes hours to do so, and it does it in about 100 minutes. So that was great, but unfortunately, not enough people have watched it yet.
How many have watched it?
According to numbers I've heard from Brendan, it's like 1 million, but we need 100 million.
Yeah, I'd say.
I did some number crunching in my head. It's like, okay, well, we've got this many hundreds of million, or even billions of people um, in the world. It's like, well, 1 million seems very small when you figure out how many billions. Even if you just figure in, okay, only 1/3 of the world is doing it. Okay, well, that's still, about 2 billion. And if you figure you cut out the kids, the children out of that, okay, we're still at 1 point something billion. So
Yeah.
100 million doesn't seem, maybe even too small for that yet. But
Well, I'll tell you something honestly that I didn't even realize until when I actually thought about it a couple of years ago. When I was growing up, as I say, I didn't know until I was about, I think I must have been about 11 or 12. I didn't realize that um, I had a gland that was different at the end of it.
mm,
Well, but then when I did realize it and I pulled the skin back, it was like it wasn't dirty or hideous or anything like that. But it's like I didn't even know because I don't think I'd ever seen. I didn't see a cut penis till I was about 14 years old,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, "What the hell have they done to that?"
Yeah,
And it's like, good grief!
yeah,
And it's like I remember thinking, "My God, had they had an accident? Did they?
mm-hmm.
It's like there's things you think of, and it's like I remember my friend, my Muslim friend, and he said, "God," he said, I was terrified of catching it in my zip, and I was like, "Oh no, you have no protection there," and it's like, wow, um, yeah. I mean, really, I have covered a lot of things, and you've got a good idea about why I feel about the way I do, because I don't like I don't like things unfair treatment of
Yeah,
people, and I don't like cowardly ways of and taking advantage of children. And uh, if somebody is given the information and they were ignorant beforehand, and they're given the information but they still don't act on it, that's where I do get quite a bit of resentment towards that
yeah,
that person, because you're not even wanting to open your eyes. But you're right. If there's the one thing that would make such a difference is the more this subject is talked about, the more that cut men will realize what's happened
yeah,
and how they've been affected. Because now I do hear a lot. You're one of them. You've not messed about with your children.
mm,
You're just one of many, which is so encouraging to
yeah,
hear.
yeah. I have a
So
group.
good to hear. You're not one that say, well, you want your boys to look like daddy.
Yeah, no. I want my boys to have a better life than me.
That's
So,
very unselfish of you.
yeah, yeah. Uh, from a selfish standpoint, though, the reason that I came out of the closet on this issue is because I had the thought that, in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years from today, might meet someone that was born today, right? And chances are I'll be alive at that point in time. And if I come across this person and they're mad that they were cut, and they somehow find out that I knew that was a bad thing at this time, then they're going to be like, well, what were you doing to help protect me or speak out about this issue, whatever? And I want to be able to say I was speaking out with everything I could in any way I could think of. So in that way, it's a little selfish. So on the psychological effects of intact individuals, what I imagine it being like, it's a disparity thing, right, between people in society. I live near LA, and I often see these tents and stuff set up on sidewalks on the road where people are sleeping, living, and it saddens me, and I want to do something about it. And I think about, I get to go home and sleep in a warm bed and all that. Why should I? Why do I deserve that treatment? That much better treatment than they do. I mean, am I really that great of a person to really deserve that? I don't know. I mean, it's something that goes through my mind. So,
But you're doing your bit.
yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
a completely selfish person. You are contributing. You're participating, and you're doing your bit. So there's no need to feel like that. You're
I
not
know.
a selfish, self-absorbed person.
Mhm.
So you should be proud of that fact. I don't think you are. You don't come across to me with like that. You should have so much pride in what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, I
No,
I
well, you
do. I do
should.
feel
It's
proud.
brilliant.
Thank you. I
It's
do.
very well. Yeah, you just. I don't know. It's not happened to me. I don't know what it must feel like. Can only imagine. But I think it's very brave to constantly confront this the whole time. So I've got total respect for you
Thank you.
because I think you're very brave,
Appreciate
and just wish there was a few more people out there like it that weren't so
it. There's a good handful of them out there. I work with it all the time. So,
good.
yeah. Yep, and I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful for everyone that joins me on these videos to talk about this stuff. It feels good to do so.
Good.
I didn't really intend for it to be a a positive thing and a psychological way for burnt out intactivists and all that, but
Oh, I'm
it's
not
just
burnt out.
good.
I still feel very angry, and I don't think that'll go away
Yeah,
because I've seen how it's affected people close to me.
yeah,
So, do
yeah,
you
and
know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of gets to the psychological effect of the very last thing is the advocates for genital autonomy. How so many of us are so negatively affected psychologically, emotionally, by this thing that's going on in the world, and we know that it's horrible, and we want to do stuff about it, but it's like there's limits to how much we can do, and we get burnt out because we confront the cognitive dissonance and the willful ignorance that goes on around it.
Willful ignorance. Yes, I like that. That's a horrible 2 words, but it's unfortunately is very, very correct.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I was ever. I mean, I dealt with my own cognitive dissonance on this, but I kind of dealt with it internally. Um, when I first started getting into this, I would ask lots of questions, but I didn't. Um, I don't think that I was ever willfully ignorant. I never attacked advocates or intactivists with ad hominem. I just ask more and more questions to try to understand and try to make sure that I'm hearing the right information, accurate information, real information, not propaganda or whatever. And people often say, well, it's like American circumcision. Well, that's biased. Like, no, it's not. It's yes, it was put together by a guy that's cut, but it was a guy like me that was trying to figure out things as he was putting together the documentary, and he interviewed many people that are very much for cutting the genitals of children. So it's it's a very fair debate that he does, and the idea that we spread propaganda, the intactivists spread propaganda. It's like propaganda is spread by people that are looking for power or money. We're not getting paid money for this.
Hold on. Would you tell me what the benefit of is of me doing what I'm doing? What exactly? What have I got to benefit from? There's nothing financial for me. I
One
mean, you
thing.
know, I've taken out a couple of hours of my time,
One
and
thing.
you know,
Your conscience.
no, I'm
My
yes,
conscience. I do this for my
yeah,
conscience. I've
yeah.
never
Thank you.
imagined that my conscience would be such a slave driver in my life, but it is. It's become, some people call it an obsession. I call it a passion. Um, I, my conscience says I have to do this. I have to spread the information. However, whatever way I can figure out to do so, with whatever, you know,
I don't think
resources
of
I
it
have.
like that with conscience. I don't think of it like that with conscience. I don't think. I just think that I don't know. Am I? I just think I need to do it, and I want to do it,
Hmm.
and it's like I just want to try and protect people from going through what my dear friends have been through. That's
Yeah.
how I view it.
Yeah. I
And
also want to protect fellow parents, from making the mistake that I almost made.
well, my friend is Lebanese, as I said, and I'll just tell you two short things. When she came to live in London, she had two boys, and she had to get a rabbi to do it because back in the 70s, no, is it early 80s? There was nothing here for any kind of circumcision. They wouldn't unless
Mhm.
something really drastic had happened. So she had to get a rabbi to
Yeah.
do it. And she said one of her sons was fine, but she said her other son, it just went all wrong.
Mm.
And she said it just will never, it was all cut unevenly and just awful.
Oh
And
man.
she told me that. And she said that she always felt so bad that she should never have done it. But everybody's come in Lebanon and she felt terrible. She's a lovely, lovely lady.
Hmm.
She really is. She didn't think
Yeah.
twice that what the harmful effects were. I don't think she'd ever been with a man that was intact at all. But then her husband's from Libya, and the things that people tell you, and he said to me, oh, he said myself and my three brothers. He said all four of us. Just my father got up one day and said, oh, none of you have been cut. The oldest was 12 and the youngest was 4. And he said, we were all taken out into was it round the back of the mosque or something? And the 4 of them were done there and then together
Wow.
as a,
Gosh.
and you're like, God, no wonder these people are screwed up.
Hmm.
Which is
Yeah.
so many of these stories you hear. And, I said, weren't you traumatized? And he said, yes, but he said there's no point saying anything, and you didn't argue because I said, like when I grew up at school in the 70s, that they were going on about we had this famous person who turned out to be a terrible, terrible paedophile, and it was all happening in the 70s, and I said people can say all kinds of things, but unless you were a child in the 70s, nobody, no adult would listen to you and believe that anyone was messing with you.
Hmm.
So, who would listen to a child that had been cut and it had all gone on wrong? They wouldn't take any notice. The doctor knows what they're doing, the surgeon knows what they're doing. What would a 7-year-old boy know?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Now, children have more protection now here. I mean, I don't know about America. I was caned. I was punished. I was caned at school.
No.
And they
Yeah.
started caning kids from 8 years old.
Gosh.
And
Hmm.
I know, but it's not related, but it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like what was acceptable. So,
Yeah.
if you have someone that's complaining, oh, you should be quiet, and boys shouldn't be moaning about things. They just get on with it. It means you're weak. It means you're less than a man. And it's like, wow. Okay. Yeah, I do. I do feel sorry for a lot of guys. I think it's more so to do. It is more so to do with a lot of straight men, that gay men are more likely to talk about stuff with other gay men.
Yeah.
They'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
But I just think straight men are just closed off, and they don't really have much choice. Or if so, like when you were like 15, or you started mentioning something about, you know, your penis or being cut or something, or saying something about it, but a rumor started going round that you were queer or something. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
And
You know what I'm saying?
less and less that being gay or being queer is more acceptable these days in the U.S., especially in particular areas like where I'm right now in California. But yeah, that was often thought of as a bad thing if you're queer or gay or whatever, right? So I've had lots of talks. In fact, one day, as on Halloween or shortly before Halloween, whatever, and I was out driving Uber or Lyft. I can't remember which one, but I actually picked up these two guys. They were all in outfits, and they were going to Halloweeny party. It was awesome. It was awesome. Pulled up, and
Yeah,
there was these other guys in these great outfits and all that. So, and I actually had a great conversation with the two of them. One was cut and one was not. So it was kind of nice to be able to just talk openly about this topic with them.
you can a lot of the time with gay men. They will talk about things like that, and yeah, it's because I think that if you've got quite strong will, and you realise, I know I'm generalising here, but a lot of the time, yeah, gay men do tend to be more sensitive than some straight men, and their feelings are more on the surface. And I think actually it's more of a balance between male and female in your head, because they did a study over 10 years in Sweden that they got some results from that were interesting, which did not surprise me whatsoever. It won't take long. I'll just explain. You know that our brains are divided up into different areas that do different things.
Yeah.
To do well. Yeah. Women's brains have got more development to do with sensitivity.
Yeah.
And men's are more developed in other ways. Between the sexes. Yep. So what they did in Sweden over 10 years is because there's no taboo in Scandinavia, right?
Uh-huh.
They looked at the brains of straight men, straight women, gay men, lesbian women, right? And they looked at how the brains developed. Yeah. And as a consequence, what they decided was, when they looked at how these areas were developed, this is no surprise to me at all, the straight men and the lesbian women's were developed in a very similar way, and the straight women and the gay men's brains were more similar to each other. Now that
makes total sense.
Is no surprise to me whatsoever.
Absolutely.
And like yourself, if you're worldly and you mixed with people and stuff, that doesn't surprise you in the least, does it? No. So it's things we've thought about, but
things are often
you're brave enough to question.
Not binary. They're often on a spectrum.
Yes. Well, sex is anyway. Sexuality is, isn't it? Yep. It is 1,000 shades of grey.
Absolutely.
And as people get older as well, their tastes in food and sex changes a lot as well. The more you go along, you learn. I eat things now I would never have gone near when I was younger, and vice versa. And I think it's a spectrum as well, to do with, I mean, as you go on through life, surely you stumble across something that you might find quite attractive
Mhm.
that you didn't realize before.
Yeah.
If you're experiencing different things, I mean, I don't know how, as a foot, maybe if you're a foot fetishist, that you're more likely to find out that than something that's a little bit more niche.
Mhm.
But as you go through life, don't you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And you develop different feelings towards stuff. Like,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
feel more strongly about this now than I did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the more I've learned, the more I'm like, no, I've got to get involved in this.
Yeah, that's a very common saying. The more you learn about circumcision, the more you hate it.
Yeah.
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 So thank you for sharing the story about the Lebanese woman. That'll fit well underneath the psychological effects to the parent.
Yeah.
For sure.
And, it's not meant as anything negative about her, because
No.
she's a lovely person, but
Yeah.
I've educated her.
Yeah.
And she said to me, no, I'd never. I had my kids again.
Yeah.
I'd never do it. Never.
For sure. Okay. The next section is about relationships.
Hmm.
And the first part is about child-parent trust, and about that trust breaking down, and believes that trust starts breaking down right away if if your baby is taken away from your skin contact, your arms, and all that, being breastfed, being cared for, to be laid down on a table or spread eagled or whatever to get genitals cut, and it's crying and screaming and whatever, and no one's doing anything about it, then that trust that it's going to be taken care of starts dropping right away, right? Um, and then if the child later on figures out how they're harmed, what they're missing, due to this being done to them, and they confront the parent, and the parent doesn't respond in a empathetic way, well, there's even more reason for the child not to trust the parent. And as a parent myself, having my children trust me is really important to me.
So it should be too. Because it would, as you say, it would affect your relationship with them fundamentally.
Yeah, I can't teach them things if they don't trust me, right?
Because then they don't respect you.
Exactly.
Goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. And then there's relationships between co-parents, mother and father, or even in some cases where there's children that are adopted for with gay and lesbian couples. Um, if one is for cutting and the other is against, that can definitely create a conflict, and in some cases it even creates divorces. Um, there's one very well-known couple in the movement, Jessica and James Rigdon, who have both testified to their struggles over this, when James was first very adamant about getting his son cut, and Jessica was very adamant about protecting him. And they ended up on a good side at the very end, and James became a bloodstained man, protester, and the works. But um, yeah. Something to definitely think about, people, before you get married. Ask this question of your partner.
So you don't have to worry about that in Europe. You just don't.
Yeah, yeah. Wouldn't that be nice if that was the case
It's
across the
just
world?
not. Yeah, South America, as you're right, is the same. And, well, massive part of India for a start. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's very,
And
very, and
it's
yeah,
only the Muslims that do that. But no, it's not. It's not thought as. Yeah. The
there's
Arab
actually
world. Oh, God.
in India, there's actually a movie I think you can find on YouTube called The Circumciser. It's about a guy that um, was Muslim in India, and he circumcised whoever wanted to be circumcised, but he didn't push it on anyone or anything like that. But um, part of the movie involves Muslims attacking India and taking over parts of India, and they came to his community and he went and met them before they got to the community and put the Quran on his head and said, "I've already circumcised everyone in this community." He lied, but he did that. So an interesting show.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, Hindus don't do this. So, yeah, definitely not something.
They
Probably.
won't hurt anybody. Buddhists and Hindus won't harm anybody.
Yeah, Chinese don't. Yeah, you're probably
No.
not gonna find Chinese partners that run into this question, or
I,
Japanese.
there's one small there's one small area in China where Jewish people live. I know, but God help them if they can't eat pork in China. That's going to make life hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pork is a big part of the menu in China.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That'd be interesting. And then this kind of gets into the child-parent trust, but there's a mother-child bond that seems to be broken. There's lots of articles about this affecting breastfeeding, for example. My wife happens to be a trained doula, and one of the things that she's often read about is about how important it is for the baby to get skin-to-skin contact and all that right after birth, as much as possible. She's a little peeved because she thinks that our oldest son bonded to me because the first hour or two after he was born, I was holding him skin to skin, not her. She needed a little work done afterwards, but yeah, so it does seem a little bit like he's more bonded to me than her, but yeah. So it can definitely affect the mother-child bond and breastfeeding.
Well, they say a child never forgets how its mother smells.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could probably identify my mom's smell still to this day myself. That's an interesting thought.
Mm.
And then we already covered pedophilia earlier. There's lots of thoughts too about pedophilia and genital cutting practices in general across the board. But you know, just the thought that people have this need or desire to cut children's genitals alone seems very pedophilic in itself. But I've heard of cases where nurses have testified to the butcher, doctor, whatever you want to call them, getting an erection while they're cutting child's genitals. So,
Sorry?
oh, you haven't heard
That's
this
the
one?
first thing you said that's actually shocked me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The word, I can't even think of a word for that.
Yeah.
Well,
that's like BDSM tied with pedophilia together.
is it a load of rubbish or is it true about when Jewish boys are circumcised that the what's the name of the person that does it? Is it a rabbi?
Moil. And I think you're
A
going
mile,
to Mississippi.
where he puts his mouth over it to stop
Yeah.
the bleeding.
Yep.
Well, if that's not a paedophile breeding ground, I'd like to know what is. I'm sorry, I don't mean anything against Jewish people at all, but I just find that very odd. That's something that should have been stopped a while ago.
Yeah, it's based on old stuff where they thought that that would clean the wound.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Well, that's old stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Nowadays, it leads to herpes infections.
Yeah. How
It
would you
comes up.
feel if, God, what would a parent feel like if they were told that their child had herpes?
Mm-hmm.
Good God.
Yeah. And that often leads to brain damage or even death because babies can't handle the herpes virus.
You know, if in Judaism, if you have a baby, a boy, and the baby dies from being cut, do they have to do it again if they have another child?
I think it's a numbers thing. It's like if if you lose 2 children, then the third one doesn't have to be cut or something like that.
2?
Yeah,
Oh,
something like that.
God.
Yeah, I know. Is that crazy? Yeah, I'd be out of my
Yeah,
mind.
well, we don't have like 10 kids anymore, do we?
No.
You know, it's different back then.
Yeah. 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 The whole idea that, it's like, is a child not going to go to heaven if it dies and not have this happen to them on the 8th day? I just that's too much of a stretch for me.
Well, I don't know about Protestants, but in Catholicism, if a baby dies without being baptized,
Mm.
it goes to limbo.
Yeah.
It can't go to heaven, which I think is incredibly wicked way of viewing things, to be honest. But I only know that from how I was brought up. But
How is limbo any better than hell?
I personally don't want to sit on a cloud playing a harp for eternity.
Yeah.
I find that a bit dull. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'd rather be where the action is, to be honest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, that could be a whole other discussion, just talking about religions. So, anyways.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think we already talked a little bit about this. I did bring it up when I talked about the medical professional psychological effect, but the doctor-patient relationship and how, like, for myself, I couldn't have a doctor, I couldn't have a GP or whoever that was my doctor if they did this or even condoned this, because as far as I'm concerned, if they see it as ethically okay to do that, then what else are they going to think of as being ethically okay when they take care of me?
Well, the appendix isn't needed. Shall we take that out at the same time? Let's do both, shall we?
Yeah, mine had to be cut out when I was, an adult, and I have a humongous scar from it. But these days, hey, if you do it as a baby, then they're probably gonna end up with a much smaller scar, and it's gonna be safer and less traumatic
It'll
to
be
the
keyhole
baby because the
surgery
baby
now,
doesn't feel
won't it?
anything. What's that?
It'll be keyhole surgery now, won't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
They will.
nowadays they like cut 3 holes, 3 little holes, and they do it laparoscopically, I guess. Same thing with the
Oh, I thought you
gallbladder.
were going to say they were doing some kind of embroidery or something. I was going to say coloured thread. Nothing would surprise me
Yeah.
now.
They send a scope in, and then they send a tool in or whatever, and it might even be robotic to a certain extent or whatever. I don't know, but yeah.
We're getting nearer to Star Trek every year.
Yeah, yeah, true. I'm waiting for my little bump thing in my chest, to start talking. My communicator.
I don't think I want to be able to communicate to people like that. I mean, remember when I was a kid, when they had those communicators, well, we've got mobile phones now.
Yeah,
That's reality. And that was science fiction 40 years ago.
yeah.
So,
Well, you can
you
already
know,
tell your phone to call someone just with your voice, so
yeah.
oh, it's not really
And
that
they've
far
got
off.
cars that drive themselves.
Hmm. I'd be happy if cars would just park themselves, because I'm so sick of getting dings on the doors. It's like, I want to pull into a parking lot, maybe pull right in front of the parking space I don't want, get out of the car, and then say, okay, car, park. And it just pulls up into the parking spot. Then I don't have to worry about the doors being, dinged.
The problem that we've got in the UK now is that cars are now bigger than they used to be. So the car parks are old. So the
Oh,
spaces are not wide enough.
yeah.
That's the problem that we have. But haven't you got a rule over there about reverse parking or something?
No,
What is it you
not
have?
a universal rule. There are rules in certain areas where they don't want you to back in to parking spots, which I feel sometimes that's very frustrating, particularly when I'm driving my big pickup truck, because I find it a lot easier to back into a parking spot than to pull
Of
in
course
straight.
it is.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we can't get over about you guys in America, we cannot even comprehend, is how you can turn right But we are so spooked out by that. We really are. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, that's really wrong. That's really wrong. And the other one is the French one, where I don't know whether it's still the case, but you don't have roundabouts over there, do you much?
Oh, yeah, yeah, more and more.
Oh,
They're
you do?
becoming more and more
Well,
popular.
you know the French, they all pile on.
Mhm,
You've got right of way to get on it.
mhm,
You have to give right of way to come off.
mm.
Whereas, when you get to a roundabout, you give way, don't you, till it's clear, then you move off? Yes, you join it? Because in
Yeah, yeah,
France,
yeah.
in France, there's no give way. You
No,
you
you.
come from the side road, you go straight on and pile onto the roundabout. Yeah, this is.
That's weird.
I don't know if it's changed.
Uh,
I'm not making it up. I
I,
remember
I
going to
hear ya.
France thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah. Well, roundabouts are certainly more fuel efficient because you don't stop and sit there and idle. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it depends on the area.
yeah. Well, the cars are changing it too with the hybrid and all that, where they shut off the gas motor. But yeah. Anyways. All right. So the last relationship is about friends and family. I don't know about you, but a lot of advocates, particularly that I know of in the United States, including myself, have lost connections with friends and family, have been blocked and stopped talking to whatever because we advocate for children to keep their genitals.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You are serious.
I have one family member that blocked me on Instagram. I hardly do much of anything on Instagram, but
That is shocking.
yeah.
No, you see, it doesn't happen here, and hardly anything is known about it. You mean, thank God, because the ignorance here would be unbelievable. And
Hmm.
basically, it's only ever associated with Jewish people.
Yeah.
It's like I remember at school, when in the showers, one of the boy was cut, only one, and they were just all taking the mickey out of him, saying, "Oh, who's a Jew boy then?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really nasty. But
Hang on just a second, Paul.
you know,
Yeah. Go ahead.
that's how ignorant it was, and it's
Yeah.
like that's the association. But apart from that, I mean, um, I can't believe that. So families won't have anything to. Wow, that's got to be an American thing. I just can't. The
Yeah.
instances of that here I would only think it would affect it to do with religion in an interracial
Hmm.
marriage when one person is
Yeah.
Jewish, one isn't, and one's Muslim and one isn't, I would imagine. But as you said, you discuss that before you have the children.
Yeah. For sure.
You do not have the child and then decide what you're going to do
Yeah.
unless it's an accident.
Yeah.
Often, often happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. I think it's in the U.S. It's a harder thing because at least here we have freedom of speech, right? We have it's kind of celebrated to have an independent, have independent thought and be an independent person, have your own ideas and all that. Uh, and then there's places like in the Middle East where it's not so much
No.
okay,
Oh,
and
no. No,
and
no, no.
so you probably don't hear about this conflict coming up between friends and family because, well, no one's speaking in the first place because they're afraid they're gonna get their head cut off or something like that. It's actually quite amazing that in Israel, and it even seems like it's happening in Egypt, um, that there are people speaking about this and being brave enough to speak against the genital cutting practices. In Israel, obviously, it's primarily just only males, and we have aliens who are only over there protesting. And we also have there's a new website called milah.org or something like that. Uh, yeah, I know milah.com. That's it's written in Hebrew, and so they're getting some people that are brave enough to speak out about it. But in Egypt, they've been doing the fight most recently. They've been doing more to try to outlaw the FGM practices, and so they're definitely
Good.
butting heads more and more there. But I'm sure that I haven't heard a whole lot of stories there, but I'm sure they're probably getting into fights about it all there too. So
Yeah,
you can
which can
watch.
only be a good thing.
Yeah, you can also watch. There's like this playlist on YouTube about female circumcision, and it has a whole list of videos where they did documentaries about the female genital cutting practices in Africa and other places in the world, and you can tell that there's different practices in different places. There are different ages that they do it to females, and and you also see how some women are standing up against it and saying, no, I'm not getting cut. I don't care, if the guy doesn't want to marry me or whatever, I'm not getting cut. So that's good to see that there's people standing up. Even in the Philippines, there's one person that I follow on Twitter, and he actually spoke out once against what happens in the Philippines. And the Philippines are very, very entrenched. They have a higher cutting rate than the United States. Extremely entrenched. You speak out about it, you get horribly, horribly attacked. They use this term called SUPOT, SUPOT, to refer to guys that aren't cut. The shaming is extreme there.
Well, they're very backward thinking and very narrow minded. I mean, you do know what a lot of that's about, don't you? This is how, because they're so Catholic, it's untrue. Because they are so Catholic, it is unbelievable.
Yeah.
In the Philippines, which doesn't help. But you know what it's about, don't you? A lot of it. If you're
That's
not
really weird
cut, you're
because,
going to be gay.
well, yeah, maybe, but Catholics are actually very against the practice, and popes have spoken out against it, saying that individuals deserve the right to body autonomy and all that stuff. I actually happen to be the webmaster now. Most recently, I took over webmaster roles for the Catholics Against Circumcision.org website. I'm not Catholic myself. I'm not making the decisions about what's on the site. I'm just getting it on there because I have the technical skills to do so. But yeah, there's a whole set of statements from various authorities in the Catholic realm that's very clearly against genital cutting of children.
I had a friend at school, and he came out to his mother that he was gay when he was 16. And his mother they're from Nigeria, and mother started crying, and she said, if I had actually gone ahead and had you circumcised, you wouldn't have become a homosexual.
Okay.
You don't need to comment, even. You don't need to. But you see, I'm just adding
I think my
these
face
things
probably
now
says
as I'm
enough, right?
remembering. Huh?
I think my face probably says enough, right?
But this is what a lot of the primitive cultures believe,
Yeah,
because they don't know any different. And it's down to, and it all goes back to what we said, isn't it? It's about control.
Yeah.
Controlling people. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're homosexual, if you're a homo in Nigeria, you've had it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be found dead somewhere. That's
That's
fact.
horrible. That's absolutely horrible. But yeah,
Well,
it's
Jamaica's the worst.
yeah, yeah,
They say
yeah.
Jamaica is the most violent deaths.
Mm.
And they live in an area, and most of the gay men live in an area on their own, in shantytown, away from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh goodness. So yeah. So that's how things are affected with friends and family. Oh, and coworkers too. There's been people that have been fired over speaking out on this topic. I know one guy that's been.
Is that legal?
I don't know. It should. I don't think it should be, but like one advocate that I know of that's been involved for decades, he got fired from a big financial institution. He had a very high ranking like executive level position, and he says that the HR person said you're un-American for speaking out against this. Like, how is this? Why did this become an American thing? How did this become a pro-American thing, or somehow attached to
Because it's
Americanism?
pride. It's like pride. Is it pride about being we're American and we're supreme and we're better than the others and we're more hygienic and because I asked the question the other day online, is it thought of as some kind of form of plastic surgery to make it look prettier or something like that, or because plastic surgery, the headquarters is in America, and you're like, well, mommy thinks it would look better if it's been cut, and it's like, well, that's one of the weirdest things when you hear a woman say, well, I want my son to have a pretty penis, and you're like, wow, you should never have been allowed to have a child in my book. If you've got a view like that, that's a very weird thing to say. But I've seen it. Many American women say things like that, and you're like, good grief, woman. Good grief. I know. And it's amazing the things that you hear and you see, But see, I've been able to give you a view of things that I've experienced over about, 45 years living in London and coming across people from all parts of the world and things. And I went to school, because I went to a Catholic school. We had a lot of, and we were in London, we had a lot of ambassadors' children and embassy children from like South America, different countries, and they were all Catholic, Brazil is very Catholic. Most of South America is very Catholic. And
all not Mexican, Hispanics.
And Catholic schools have always had the reputation to being very good, quite strict, but you get a good education. So that was certainly the case here. But I always joke and say that because my parents sent me to the primary school, the way it was, the name, it was predestined I was going to be gay, because my mum didn't understand when I first said it to her, but it was later she came back to me and she said, I now understand what you meant, because the primary school was called Our Lady Queen of Heaven, and I was like, that's a very camp name for a school. It really is, but there you go. Well, I hope I've been of some help with the things that I've experienced and come across, and you're going to get a different view as well from somebody in Europe as well.
I spoke with one person or two people from Germany already, so
do they have similar views?
Yep, sure.
People with a brain.
There's 3 other major sections, but they're really short discussions. So there is a connection here with FGM and intersex normalization surgeries. The whole spectrum of ritual genital cutting is intertwined. There's some schools of thought about FGM starting because MGM was started first, right? So a lot of advocates believe that we won't be able to end FGM until MGM is ended, because kind of like a root to it. But
oh wow, okay.
Because
I thought the other way around.
I think a lot of people think that, but when you listen to the excuses that are used for female genital cutting, and even intersex genital cutting, they all sound the same. That's all the same dumb excuses. Like, look like daddy, or if the intersex is like look more male or look more female, look like the binary, obviously. And it comes down to finances too for the female circumcision stuff. The family can't sell the daughter if she's not fixed, right?
What?
Oh, you
She's
haven't heard
not
this
a camel.
I know, but that's reality.
Oh, she's only got one hump, not two. We'll never get her married off.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But it's the same thing with male genital cutting in U.S. and others. It's tied to finances for sure, because the medical industry is making money from it. I imagine the Moyles, they have a job to do, so they feel like they have to keep doing it, so they maintain their job and keep getting paid. And you have the companies that sell sex lube, and as long as guys don't have their own lubrication and rolling mechanism built in, then well, they're gonna need more sex lube, and with a higher level of ED, sell more Viagra, so maybe Cialis or whatever, all these different ED medications. So yeah, it's
God, I've learned a lot tonight.
yeah. And then there's the next section about social productivity. The first thought is, well, if all these people that are doing genital cutting of children were doing something else, what would we be solving in the world or doing better in the world? Would we be building more homes, feeding more people, solving more health care issues?
Cancer would be a good one.
Exactly. And then advocates spending all their time trying to educate people instead of spending hours and hours trying to educate people online or in person or whatever. What would they be doing instead? Come up with lots of ideas I'd rather be doing.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the very last thing that I added recently is forced retraction, which harms. And this happens because the genital cutting,
Ignorance.
the genital cutting has been going on for so long that we've forgotten, or never even got into the medical literature in the first place, and parents don't know how to deal with the intact penis because, well, hey, dad doesn't have one. All right. And even if dad has one, if he didn't learn early on that it's attached when he's little and not to forcefully retract it, then he thinks, well, that gland needs to be visible, it needs to be out there in the open, whatever. Or mom, has only been with cut eyes. It's like, well, that's really weird. The gland should be exposed, or we should be able to look in
Well,
there.
if they pull it back before it's supposed to be, it's going to fuck it up, excuse my French, and it's going to have to be repaired. So they
Absolutely.
probably would have to cut it.
And I don't think it
Done
is repairable.
deliberately, do you think?
I don't. I think it's all out of ignorance, honestly. But I have heard of one case where a doctor wasn't allowed to perform the circumcision on this baby boy for whatever reason, because it wasn't medically needed. So he caused the medical need by forcefully retracting, which led to infections. Thus, now he has an excuse to cut the prepuce of the boy. So, yeah.
I hope he hasn't got children. Shouldn't have any. Shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah. This is something
Be
that I
that
know.
barbaric.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible. This is something I know that the folks at doctorsexposingcircumcision.org are working on, figuring out a way to educate people about the harms of forced retraction. I've had thoughts about this many times, because you think about skin bridges. right? And how the body creates scar tissue. So
Yeah.
if forced retraction is causing all these micro tears in the glands and maybe tears in the inner mucosa, and then then it goes back up, and then the body heals itself inside of there, is it generating scar tissue that leads to a bad diagnosis of phimosis later on? I mean, does it cause like permanent adherence of the inner mucosa to the glands that won't ever separate properly without using a knife? That's the kind of thing that really, I mean, that to me seems like it could be worse than not having your prep use at all.
Yeah.
So I actually, when I realized that, I started calling around to daycares in my area and said, "Hey, how do you take care of an intact penis?" And I was very elated to see that most daycares knew how to do the proper care of the intact penis. But I think part of it is because I live in a highly Hispanic area, and the Hispanic population, for the most part, does not do this, so they
No.
have an idea of how to
No.
take care of the intact penis. But I did come
No.
across one daycare that did not, and I said, "Oh, bad, bad, bad answer. You guys go look at these websites and learn about how to care for the intact penis properly, please, because you guys are probably harming them." And well, one of the things that led me to that was there was a tweet by someone that worked in a daycare that said that if she ever has children, she'll definitely get them circumcised, because every time that she had to change a diaper on this boy and pull back to clean the inside, the boy would be absolutely screaming and all that. I was like, "Hello, you're forcefully retracting. You're not supposed to do that." So that person got an education on Twitter.
I think it's in Mexico that they use the name for a little boy's willy as a rosebud.
Mm.
And I think that's really sweet, because I suppose it does really, like a closed rose.
Yeah.
It's like, it's funny how things are in different languages and interpretations of things.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Oh.
it's also down to money as well. I know that in the aristocracy in England, they were circumcised because they wanted to stand out from everybody else as being, you know, the upper echelons of
Yeah.
society.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's often been a thought too, is that the wealthy, if you're wealthy, you get it done because it's good. It's an upgrade. It's like getting a luxury car instead of a little funky car or whatever.
Don't,
Yeah.
don't. You get a higher level of trim. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually, that's the opposite is true, but
I'm sorry, that's terrible.
yeah.
I'd say it'd be more the choice of fabric interior, cloth or leather, I'd say.
Yeah.
I know I'm being a bit facetious, I'm sorry.
No,
But
no, for
I
sure.
have to lighten it a bit because it is
Absolutely.
so awful. Isn't it? That's what I
It
mean.
is. It is. It's so crazy. And yeah, I don't mind at all joking and napping about people that justify this. They should be laughed at, because there's been so many jokes about intact penises. It's really irritating. I mm, just anymore I see it, and I just, it's like, if you were making jokes about that, about female genitalia, you'd be chased off stage in a heartbeat, right? Why is it okay to be making
Yes,
jokes
yeah.
about male
Well,
genitalia like that?
one of my favourite jokes is about a man's willy. I think it's hilarious. I love it. It's nothing to do with whether someone's cut or not.
Mm.
And it's probably, I won't imagine it, most of the English speaking world now. I love it. What did the elephant say to the naked man?
Yours is small? I don't know.
You pick up buns with that.
That's a good one.
That's great.
That's funny.
That's not sweet. That's so nice, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
You just, I remember it was a cartoon and it was this very confused looking elephant.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's great.
you're like, you pick up buns with that. It's quite sweet.
That's funny. Okay, well, I've gotten through the whole list. And you have any other thoughts on the whole topic before we wrap up?
No, I've remembered and shared a lot of things with you over the years,
great.
and you know how I felt about it. I just hope it's been some use, and very pleased that I've spoken to you, because I've learnt quite a lot as well.
I definitely appreciate it.
Well, it's, you know, I think it's good to share experiences,
Yeah.
because your world is very different to mine.
Yeah.
It's opposite ends of it.
Yeah.
But
well, thanks for sharing your side of the pond with the rest of us, because more people need to get more cultured here in the United States. Need to see how the rest of the world functions around this.
well, the last thing I can say to you is that when I talk to people about it here, the most shocking thing that they find about it for America is the fact of, it's not shocking that there's money to be made out of it, because that's what America is all about, according to the rest of the world. It's capitalism and making as much money as possible.
Yeah.
But the thing that's shocking is the pharmaceutical and selling human tissue. People here find that absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
Absolutely appalling.
Yeah,
so
I'm surprised
you
that's
can give
legal.
that feedback back from people you really find that offensive. So there you go.
Yeah. Sure. All right, Paul, thank you so much again for sharing your stories and your viewpoints on this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. I guess it's nighttime over there, so have a good evening.
It's 10:30ish. All right.
Yeah.
See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.